Today on NEDA Connections, we are excited to be joined by Lightner and Meagan Martin, two professional rock climbers. In addition to being a professional rock climber, Meagan Martin is also an ESPN commentator, athleta model, star of American Ninja Warrior, and a former Division I pole vaulter at Vanderbilt University, who has made it a point to promote body positivity within the climbing community. Meagan will be interviewing Lightner as a professional rock climber who has personal experience with an eating disorder. Started climbing at age 6 and became the Open Adult Lead Climbing National Champion in his first year of eligibility, at age 15. Throughout his career, has won 12 national championships, 10 in youth categories and 2 in the adult circuit, and is a 5-time Youth World Champion medalist. Thank you both for joining us, and I will hand it off to Meg.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with you today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for being with me. Yeah.
And I also really love that you are in front of your climbing wall right now. I think that's nice for the viewers who don't know anything about climbing. So on that note, can you tell us a little more about who you are and your connection to the NEDA community?
Absolutely. So I'm Kai. I've been climbing since, I've always climbed everything since before I could walk. As a young age, I used to get in trouble because my mom would set up baby gates around the house to keep me out of rooms, but I would climb over them before I could actually stand up and walk on my own. And growing up ADHD, I was always climbing things I had no business. And so one day, I was climbing a flagpole at my mom's job while she was talking to her boss, and a lady walked by, saw me on a flagpole, and decided that not only did she want to get me down, but she decided to write the address to the local climbing gym on a sticky note. She gave it to me, and she told my mom that I should really try rock climbing. And my mom, being desperate to let my ADHD energy out, was willing to try anything. So the next day after school, she brought me to the climbing gym. And she was like, please get my child into the sport. It'd be something that I'm sure he would appreciate. And a lot of people who don't really know a lot about ADHD, it can be really hard to focus on one thing. But once you find a focus, it's almost like an obsession. And so for me, walking into that gym, every other sport my mom tried to put me into, it didn't click for me. I was always distracted. However, climbing was that thing where I could sit in the gym for 3 hours at a time and be ultra focused on one activity, and nothing else could take my focus away from it. And it was such a unique thing for me that I felt like the sport kind of chose me. And so my coach then, who's still my coach now, Shane Messer, put me on the climbing team there, and I started competing. And I remember working with different coaches because growing up in North Carolina, there wasn't a major climbing club there. And so a lot of the time I was like a surrogate child to a lot of different teams across the country. And at a young age, I remember working with different coaches and being approached with the statement of like, you don't really look like a lot of other champions. You don't look like a lot of other climbers who are achieving great things at a high level. And I remember thinking that, and I was like, well, I don't quite understand. And it was because I was so much taller than the other athletes, and I was like naturally had a bigger build than a lot of other athletes, that it was always made of a point that if I wanted to be at that level, that I kind of had to accommodate to a certain size, a certain weight, in order to be able to be competitive with the other athletes. And a lot of times coaches would like make little comments about my size and my weight, or that my butt was bigger than other athletes, or that I climbed heavier. And so because of that, I always internalized the idea that in order to be able to be at the top of my sport, that I had to fit a certain mold as an athlete. And so because of that, I always made an effort to watch what I eat and exercise to make sure that I was being really in shape. And eventually, as my goals got higher and my training got harder, the idea that I had to be smaller intensified into a point where eventually I was just well underweight what I was supposed to be. I think I was 5'6" and I weighed 95 pounds, which was well under what I needed to be in order to be healthy. And, I was always a lot taller as well than other athletes. The average size for I think a World Cup competitor, maybe like 5'7" or so, and I'm 6'3", and I've been above 5'7" since I was like 13 or 14,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I
so
think when I met you, you were very tall compared to me already, and you were only 13 years old. So it's definitely
right, and
true.
so the taller frames become more weight, and so as I
Hmm.
continued in the sport. And I started getting taller and my muscle mass started to get bigger. I thought that I was kind of failing at my piece of the job. Like I wasn't able to keep up the training or I was doing something wrong to where I was gaining too much weight. And because of that, I was doing really unhealthy things to keep my weight down, like abusing laxatives and skipping meals and running 4 or 5 miles a day, 2 or 3 times a day in order to keep like my calories that I burned high. And eventually, your body can only run on E for so long. And so my body started to like reject certain things that I was doing. And I remember my mom taking me into a pediatrician and basically saying that my liver was really close to failure because I wasn't giving it enough nutrients or I was kind of abusing some of the things. And so she was saying that if I didn't improve my eating habits, if I didn't have a better or healthier relationship with food, that I was at risk of liver failure and possibly dying. And so that was a kind of a wake-up call for me, but it also made me realize that maybe I wasn't doing a good enough job. And it definitely gave me a lot of negative thoughts about myself. And eventually I just thought it was probably a good time to like maybe take a break from the sport. From the competitive side of the sport and maybe focus a little bit more on other aspects.
Totally. And I mean, first of all, I have to say, being able to get up and share your story is going to do so much for the younger generation. I think that I think it's easy for people to assume because they haven't seen a certain kind of athlete that it's not possible. And it breaks my heart that, people were putting that idea into your head at a young age when in reality they should have looked at you as being tall and having all these other attributes and differences in your creativity and how you approach climbing and looked at it from a positive perspective rather than a negative, and maybe we wouldn't, or maybe you wouldn't have suffered through what you've gone through. So that's just something I think that in our sport needs to be addressed more, just being open to different body types, because I know you wrote in your outside article that we all have different body types. No one body type is the same, and it's wild to think that there is that idea surrounding most sports, especially strength to weight ratio sports, and that is the climbing
Hmm.
sport. So
Hmm.
I think that it's a difficult topic to talk about, and I just applaud you so much for getting up here and sharing that with us all right now. I also think it's really important to note that, I mean, when we think of eating disorders, we generally think of them affecting women, but in reality, eating disorders don't discriminate. So to hear a story from you, a male athlete, and in addition to that, a black male athlete, which again, I think there's this idea that this disease only affects white people sometimes, which is not true. It affects everybody. So what made you really motivated to share your story and be vulnerable in front of the world?
Um, I think I remember when I kind of made the decision to publish that sort of writing because I mean I've always written about my personal experiences. I think it's really important for a lot of top athletes when you're meeting at end of the season or even during the season to be like recording how you feel, how training is feeling, how you mentally feel so that you can like analyze that and be better for the next season. So I'm always doing that in a journal. And so I kind of written about how I felt in my experience in the past, and I remember I had been asked from a publication about my experience in youth and how I felt youth climbing would affect, the young athletes mentally and physically. And because there was a campaign sort of trying to eliminate a category, a younger category. And I was explaining how positively the sport had affected me as a youth climber because I think that it gave me a level of discipline and focus and maturity that I don't think you can really gain from a lot of other things. And I do think it's extremely positive, but I kind of felt a little bit disingenuous writing only that perspective and not the other side, you know? And so when I was reading over some of the things that I was writing at the time, I was like, maybe I should, publish this part because I feel like it's really important for kids and parents and coaches to know that um, climbing or any competitive sport for that matter can be a good thing for youth athletes if it's managed properly, because every athlete isn't the same. There's a lot of athletes that defy what is considered like the mold or the trend of
Mm-hmm.
the time to being successful. I mean, you have athletes like Usain Bolt, who before then no one thought that a tall athlete could run that fast, and not only did he run that fast, but he's the fastest ever. Or a Serena Williams, who's a lot more stockier than other female athletes, but she's the
Mm-hmm.
greatest tennis player of all time. And so I feel like there's a lot of athletes that do break the mold, and being able to recognize that having a healthy body is much more important than conforming to someone else's expectations for body image is super, super important. I just feel like, yeah, I felt like sharing my story will hopefully like not only help other people who are struggling through
Mm-hmm.
the issues with eating disorders, but also help people realize that this affects all athletes, regardless of demographic or who you are.
Yep.
Because I know that there are stigmas against who is more disproportionately affected, but when I even made my post about this, um, I feel like the most messages I got were from male athletes because there's
Yeah.
this stigma that it's like something to be ashamed of or something to be embarrassed about. And so I
Yeah.
feel like it definitely does affect both at a similar rate. It's just that you don't hear a lot of male athletes speaking up about it.
Yeah, and I think again, you taking that leap and doing so just opens the door for, like you said, so many other athletes to come forward. And I think that's so selfless of you to do. And I'm so glad that you made that decision. The other thing I really liked in your article was you kind of placed a call to action with parents and coaches to really take a step back and reassess how they are dealing with their young athletes and how
Hmm.
important the little things that you say really have an effect on a younger athlete. And I think athletes in general, I mean, we are so strong-minded in so many ways, but then our minds are also a little weak in the sense that, I mean, athletes generally have rituals, right? We might try to wear lucky socks or have a lucky keychain. And so when you think about it, if you put, you know, thinking about weight and what you're eating into that aspect, it's so easy to kind of go down a slippery slope and be like, okay, well, at this competition, maybe I weighed this much, so I have to weigh that much in order to do well at the next one. It's this just slippery
Hmm.
cycle that we can find ourselves in. So I think
Yeah.
taking that risk and talking about it and making people just more aware on how important it is to promote, body positivity and that each person is different. I just really commend you for that. Um,
I think that another a really important thing is
mhm,
that a lot of times when you start as a youth athlete, it could be
mhm,
so hard to distinguish your own self-worth from your climbing accomplishments.
totally.
Because for me, I felt like because this was my passion and that this is what made me unique as a person,
Mhm,
that like if I wasn't achieving what I felt like I could achieve or making my coaches happy or the people around me happy, then I was failing at my job. I was failing at life. And
which is a
so
lot of
me,
pressure
yeah,
for a
you
young
know,
athlete. That's not
definitely,
like a 13-year-old should not feel that way.
yeah. And so, being an ISO and instead of thinking about my warm-up routine, thinking about, like, did I eat too much for breakfast or like the fact that the number on the scale was like a couple decimal places off from being what I needed it to be. It was definitely like something that like clouded my mind and my judgment. And so yeah, like I think people definitely underestimate how like damaging uh, having that kind of mindset can be in the long term as well. Yeah.
Totally. Um, Speaking about mindset and mental health, how are you protecting your mental health and recovery during this current climate of COVID-19? Black Lives Matter protests, and just our current situation is very different than what we've experienced. And I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot, just being in the climbing community and having lots of new conversations with people. So how are you taking care of yourself?
Um, you know, I live in North Carolina, so I live close to a lot of beaches. So that definitely helps. Um, in general, I think what's really interesting and what people don't take into account is the fact that for a lot of us as African Americans, a lot of the things that are happening on the news that are being broadcasted aren't new. These aren't new revelations or new information. And I don't think that seeing this on television has really impacted my mental health now any worse than it has been in the past, per se. I think it's more so the response from everything going on, with COVID-19, everyone being in the house and being so reliant on the news and social media to keep them updated on COVID updates and et cetera. I think that it's such a unique time where everyone's able to see the same information at the same time and not have a lot of distractions. And so because of that, people are becoming more aware of the systematic racism that affects our communities and even just appalled by the idea that, I mean, their everyday activities could be helping or perpetrating a system that hurts other people. And so I feel like a lot of it is just like managing being an ally,
Hmm.
um, and having allies come to you and ask you for advice or information or how you feel or what's going on because even though like it's a blessing to have so many people understand at the same time, it's also like like this isn't new information and it
Yeah.
can be frustrating to be around people and friends who um who you love and appreciate and know would do the world for you, but only are just now understanding that you live side by side but live two different realities, you know?
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it's a big responsibility right now.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, it's great to see that response and people really taking it in at this point and wanting to do what they can to stop systemic racism and stop um, all of the things that have been happening and just try to make real change. And I think that that's a good direction to be going into for sure. But yes, I'm glad you're able to get to the beach though, because some me time is always needed, right?
No, it's super great because I feel like when you scroll down your timeline and you see
Yeah.
like I feel like the more times you see black people being killed senselessly, unfortunately it desensitizes you from the reality of the situation. It almost like sensationalizes the fact that people are dying, and it's not a spectacle. It's a real issue that needs to be addressed with action. And I'm happy that a lot of people are taking into account, but it can be quite overwhelming to kind of see that repetitively all the time. So yeah, like I'm super happy that it seems like so many people are understanding and becoming new allies and are being so helpful. But yeah, like this is something that can't stop, after a verdict has been reached in these cases or all the Breonna Taylor's killers are prosecuted. It is something that is systemic and is rooted in our society. It has to be dismantled, and it's going to take a lot of time to do. And so, like, I just hope and pray that that persistence continues.
100%. So well said.
Yeah,
We're gonna make real change. I can feel it. I feel like we're going in the right direction.
I sure hope
Um,
so.
I'm right. In honor of Men's Health Month, what advice can you share with fellow males or athletes watching who are contemplating or currently struggling with disordered eating and exercise under the guise of health and improving performance?
I think maybe the best advice I can give is like don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that
Yes.
there's always a stigma that a lot of men, I mean, asking for help is it will demasculate. Oh Lord, I'm trying to find the word, but like emasculate you or something like that.
That's
Make
it.
you
That's
less
it. You got
than.
it.
Yeah, make you less than. And
Hmm.
so being able to like reach out to the proper resources, whether it's a therapist or a nutritionist, to be able to balance that out is super important. And I feel like for me, getting the DMs and the emails and different messages from people, the main concern was is like I was afraid to tell anyone because I
Hmm.
felt like people wouldn't think of me the same. People would perceive me as being weak, and asking for help is not weak. If anything, it makes you a better human on the other side. And so, treating yourself right, treating your mental
Hmm.
state right, I think all those are super important to living like a happy life, or even be able to pursue what you love to do for a long time and consistently. I couldn't imagine how long it would have taken me to overcome what I was going through, or even if I ever would have, if I had never
Hmm.
talk to my mom or talk to a therapist, or have my mom realize that what was going on wasn't healthy for me and kind of take matters out of my own hands. And so I definitely wouldn't want anyone to ever have to go through that alone. It's definitely not a struggle that you can do by yourself. It takes a team.
100%. The power of conversation and building a team around you to support you is all you can ask for, and the best way to deal with anything difficult that you're struggling with. That is amazing advice, and I'm so glad that you were able to find that for yourself and work through this and, be a great example for anyone else in athletics dealing with it, or in, any walk of life. Well,
Yeah.
it was such a pleasure to get to have this conversation with you, Kai. I am so honored that I was able to conduct this interview. For people who want to know more about your story, they can go to your website that has an amazing blog with all of your writing, kai-lightner.com, right?
Yep.
And then just wanted to make sure I got that right. And then at Kai Lightner for Instagram.
Yep.
And please, thank you. Continue to be yourself, be an example, and I'm just so proud of you and everything that you're doing. Thanks for your courage.
Thank you so much. Thank you for interviewing me.
Of course, it was my pleasure. That's all for NEDA Connections for today, and we'll see you next time.